I need to leave 5 minutes. I'll be back soon. Okay.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. It's Michael.
Hi, Michael.
Wow, that's really a weird effect. My disappearing hand.
When you use those backgrounds, it does that. So it's like.
Yeah. Sorry about that. I think we're good now. And I just confirmed that it's as I thought, that you should share, not now, but you should, now you're unable to, because we don't want the wrong slides to be on when it goes live.
Mm-hmm.
But when it's your turn, please do share your screen so that you can show your slide. And then the next person, and then you can stop sharing so that the next person can share. Well, thank you again for being here. And I'm trying to see everybody. And at the moment, I just see Sanya. And although I like him a lot, I'd like to see everybody. I'm trying.
Probably in the upper right corner, sometimes there's like a view.
Yeah. Ooh. No. It's funny. Why do I only see one of you at a time? I guess I only see whoever is speaking.
Oh, that may, yeah.
Do you see everybody? Do you see?
I see everyone.
I see. Aha. Okay. Now I see everybody. Okay. I was obviously, Diego, I can't see you. You've logged off?
Oh, no, I'm here. I'm just taking some notes here. Sorry.
Okay.
So I have to figure out, Leonor, I'm not sure I will be able to share my screen, but because it's a bit complicated, the technical issue, I'm logged in, not on the platform wherein my presentation is present. So I have no clue whether I can just.
Okay. The organization can do it. And
okay.
When it's your turn, I'll ask the organization to do it.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Sonia. I'm having an issue too bringing up my presentation. It's weird. Usually I can do it with Zoom, but the PowerPoint's not opening. Do they have a copy of mine?
Yeah, they should have, right? We send our presentations, right?
I'm going to share mine, see if you can see it.
Okay.
You cannot share your screen while the other participant is sharing.
We can't, because we're actually
okay.
supposedly live now. So people are starting to log in. And so we don't want to show the wrong thing.
Okay.
Okay.
But in theory, I can do that.
Yep. And I'll just mute so I. The order will be, as I had said, I'll make the presentation first, the introduction first. then I will pass on the word to Diego, who will make his presentation, and then I'll use that as a cue to let you each speak about the avenues that there exist to accelerate patent examination. And it can be, you know, particularly COVID or things that we could apply to COVID, like accelerated examination at the EPO or at the USPTO. So, and then we'll go in the order of first Caroline, and then Sanya, and then Michael. And then for the other questions, since there's no slides, I'll try and make it a bit more dynamic and not go in the same order every time. So kind of go, and for each question, I'll give like a 30-second like Brazil situation example. So when we talk about what's not patentable, I'll say, oh, we have restrictions for methods of treatment and restrictions for diagnostics, but I won't delve into any details, and I'll leave that up to you. And if you can try to 2-3 minutes maximum per question, that would be great. I think, yeah, 3 is fine. I think that's it. And then we'll also have questions from the audience in the end. Diego, if during the chat you want to add some information on Brazil as well, you're more than welcome to. And then, of course, during the questions, I'm imagining you'll have a few questions. Just so that you know, yesterday, there was another panel that focused on Brazil and focused more on the kind of how the Brazilian industry is coping and getting ready for COVID and that sort of thing. And we also had a speaker from the Director of Patents of the Patent Office spoke. So this is meant to be more of an international overview and comparison to Brazil. So I'll make a little reference and introduction to that panel that happened yesterday. And okay, thank you all again for participating. And Michael, I hope you drank lots of coffee.
Leonor, will you be able to confirm that they'll be able to pull up the slides for some reason? I'm having.
Yeah, they will. They will. Okay. They will. They just confirmed that they have everyone's slides. I've told them the order. And okay, and then and they can log into your slides.
Okay.
I think I'll ask everybody to mute because we already have participants waiting to begin. And then we'll unmute at 2:30, if that's okay. Boa tarde a todos, bem-vindos a este painel. Eu gostaria de, em primeiro lugar, agradecer à ABPI pelo convite para moderar este table topic e também aos palestrantes que gentilmente aceitaram compor essa mesa. Agradeço também a todos os presentes pela presença. Ontem nós fomos brindados com um painel brilhante sobre a importância das patentes relacionadas à importância das patentes para a inovação e o seu protagonismo na proteção de invenções úteis no combate à Covid-19, com um foco especial no Brasil. E hoje o nosso table topic debaterá questões relacionadas ao exame acelerado de licenciamento de patentes relacionadas à Covid no Brasil, na Europa, nos Estados Unidos e na Ásia. Gostaria de apresentar os palestrantes de hoje. Nós temos conosco o Dr. Diego Muscoff, que é pesquisador em propriedade industrial pelo INPI da DIRPA e é o chefe substituto da SAESP, Serviço de Assuntos Especiais e responsável pelos programas de exames prioritários do INPI, incluindo o recém-programa de priorização de pedidos de patentes relacionados à Covid. Ele é arquiteto e urbanista pela Universidade Federal do Rio Grande do Sul, mestre em engenharia civil e doutor em políticas públicas na área de inovação, propriedade industrial e desenvolvimento, da Universidade Federal do Rio de Janeiro. E também especialista em gestão pública contemporânea na área de gerenciamento de processos de negócios pela Universidade Federal do Rio Grande do Sul. Agradecemos imensamente a sua ilustre presença e também ao INPI por sempre se mostrar tão disponível para colaborar com a nossa associação. Contamos também com a presença da doutora Caroline Payar, que é Patent Attorney perante o EPO e também perante o Escritório de Patente dos Países Baixos. É sócia e presidente do Conselho do Escritório NLO, que tem escritórios nos Países Baixos e na Bélgica, e tem 18 anos de experiência em assessoria a cliente na área de ciências da vida. Ela fez uma grande école em Paris e depois também um doutoramento na área de bioquímica e hematologia também em Paris. E é especialista em biotecnologia, biologia molecular, imunologia e bioquímica. Temos também Sanya Sukduang, que é advogado e sócio do escritório Cooley, nos Estados Unidos, onde atua na área de contencioso de patentes com foco em ciências da vida. É bacharel em biologia pelo Boston College e formada em Direito pela American University e da Washington College of Law. É membro da AIPLA, da National Asian Pacific American Bar Association e da Thai American Bar Association. E temos Michael Lin, que é sócio do escritório Marks & Clerk e diretor do Grupo de Ciências da Vida nos escritórios de Hong Kong e Beijing. É bacharel em Bioquímica pela Universidade da Califórnia, Berkeley, e formado em Direito pela Boston University Law School. É membro do Conselho do International IP Commercialization Council, do Children's Cancer Therapy Development Institute e do IBSA de Hong Kong. É membro do Conselho e secretário da Leis China-Hong Kong e membro internacional da IP Strategies Association. Muito obrigada novamente a todos por aceitarem este convite e um agradecimento especial ao Sr. Michael Lin, que se junta a nós desde Hong Kong e para quem serão 3 horas da manhã quando o painel terminar. Quando eu mandei essa mensagem para todos os palestrantes para saber se estava tudo bem, ele respondeu, tudo certo do meu lado, eu estou acordado. O painel vai começar com a organização, com a apresentação do Dr. Diego Muscpoff, que falará sobre os diversos programas Fast Track disponíveis no INPI e, em especial, do programa Fast Track para pedidos de patente relacionados à Covid. Após a apresentação do Dr. Diego, iniciaremos a nossa mesa de debates, onde eu promoverei o debate fazendo perguntas a todos os palestrantes. Durante esta conversa, os panelistas, como não falam português, eu mudarei para o idioma em inglês e tentarei não misturar os dois. E peço desde já desculpa às intérpretes. A plateia poderá fazer perguntas por escrito, tanto em português como em inglês, ao longo das discussões, e no final poderemos abrir para debates. Gostaria então assim de passar a palavra ao Dr. Diego e pedir para que ele comece a sua apresentação.
Obrigado pela palavra, boa tarde a todos, boa tarde a todas presentes. Muito obrigado pelo convite, né? É sempre bom o INPI poder participar desses encontros, principalmente desse encontro da ABPI com uma mesa tão diversa, né, com pessoas de diversos países. Isso certamente enriquece o nosso conhecimento enquanto instituto e também permite que a gente aprenda com outros institutos e veja outras formas de realizar as coisas, inclusive o trâmite prioritário. Sem muita delonga, eu já queria partir para a minha apresentação, então vou compartilhar com vocês a minha tela. Só para confirmar, estão conseguindo enxergar a minha tela ou não?
Sim.
Então, vou falar rapidamente sobre o trâmite prioritário de pedidos de patente e vou dar um enfoque especial nessas patentes relacionadas com Covid-19 no Brasil e também vou falar um pouco sobre o anúncio de licenciamentos de patentes, uma nova ferramenta que o INPI está implementando, chamada Vitrine de IPI, que a ideia é realmente ajudar o licenciamento de pedidos de patente em geral, mas também esses relacionados com Covid-19. Então, a nossa agenda é bastante simples, né? Vou falar sobre mostrar alguns resultados, vou focar um pouco mais no prioritário do Covid-19 e depois falar sobre a vitrine de IPI do INPI. Iniciando, então, sobre o trâmite prioritário. Acho que a primeira coisa que vale a pena comentar é o trâmite prioritário. Ele é um programa novo do INPI, ele está bastante estruturado e muita informação está no site. Então, vocês usuários ou vocês agentes de propriedade industrial têm um anteparo aí, né, de informações bastante consolidado onde vocês podem buscar. O site do INPI está todo reformulado. A forma mais fácil de achar é ali naquele menu sanduíche ali, patentes, trâmite prioritário, e aí vocês vão ter uma gama enorme de informações. Lá está toda a legislação referente ao prioritário, todas as modalidades estão lá descritas, quem pode pedir, quando pode pedir e assim por diante. Quanto custa também, tem modalidades pagas, tem modalidades gratuitas. E aqui eu trouxe para vocês uma tabela resumo de todas as modalidades que o INPI tem. São 17 ou 18 modalidades já diferentes, sendo que o PPH ainda se divide nas diversas modalidades de acordo com cada parceiro. E as modalidades estão aqui agrupadas em relação assim, se o motivo é em razão do depositante, se o motivo é em razão da matéria, da situação que está envolvendo aqueles depositantes ou da cooperação internacional. E aqui eu queria dar 3 destaques. Eu sei que o foco é o primeiro ali, né, tecnologia para tratamento da Covid-19, mas eu gostaria de destacar outras 2, que são projetos pilotos que acabaram de nascer nesse ano agora, que é tecnologia no mercado e tecnologia resultado de financiamento público. Para falar um pouco deles em geral, né, as diversas modalidades, às vezes as pessoas, inclusive, se perdem um pouco, não sabem bem qual modalidade é melhor utilizar, e a gente fez um questionário ajudando o depositante ou ajudando o requerente. Então, ele pode acessar um questionário na página dos prioritários, e de acordo com o que ele responde, se tem uma pessoa física, se tem pessoa jurídica, se está envolvido em contrafação ou não, a pessoa pode ficar sabendo ali a melhor escolha, que vai ter resposta mais rápida do INPI. E uma coisa curiosa sobre o Covid e sobre essas tecnologias de mercado e financiamento público é que tanto o depositante quanto um terceiro podem fazer a solicitação. Então, caso vocês ou algum concorrente veja uma tecnologia que pode ser licenciada ou que gostaria de produzir de Covid ou de qualquer outra tecnologia, pode pedir o trâmite prioritário com base nessas modalidades. Então, ela ficou bastante flexível e a gente espera que isso estimule o uso dos prioritários. Falando um pouco sobre os resultados, e agora elogiando painéis como esse, justamente com base na experiência internacional, o INPI vem aprimorando as suas modalidades de trâmite prioritário, vem ampliando elas e melhorando muito os resultados. Aqui a gente tem o tempo, né, diferentes tempos. O tempo que se demorava para se decidir se era prioritário ou não, o tempo para avaliação formal, o tempo para a primeira ação e o tempo de decisão, em 3 grupos diferentes. Pedidos decididos no primeiro semestre de 2015, que era quando a gente não tinha nenhum piloto, nem patente verde, nada, era só os prioritários mais básicos. Depois, no primeiro semestre de 2020, que são os dados oficiais, a gente começou com um projeto piloto novo, no segundo semestre de 2019, então aqui ainda tem pedidos que estão no piloto e que estão antigos, e aqui no finalzinho os prioritários requeridos no primeiro semestre desse ano. Então, observem a redução abrupta de tempo que a gente tem, inclusive com relação aos outros, com a fila normal, vamos chamar assim, do INPI. Então, hoje em dia, rapidamente a gente decide ali se a pessoa é ou não prioritário, e em questão ali de 100, 90 dias já tem uma primeira ação ou mesmo uma decisão do seu trâmite prioritário. Então, a gente tem conseguido resultados bastante expressivos com o uso dos prioritários e boa parte disso graças a esse conhecimento que veio com a experiência internacional. Falando dos prioritários do Covid-19, eu trouxe aqui bastante texto, mas é mais para poder distribuir essa apresentação depois. Mas basta saber que elas incluem processos de equipamentos, materiais, tanto para o diagnóstico, quanto para a profilaxia, quanto para o tratamento da Covid-19, então é uma visão bem ampla. Abrange invenções, modelos de utilidade e seus componentes, e também seus correlatos, então matérias relacionadas a isso também podem pedir trâmite prioritário. Vale tanto para o pedido novo, então desenvolver o pedido agora é para o Covid, pode pedir prioritário, mas também vale para aqueles pedidos que estão em andamento. Então, caso vocês tenham algum pedido que esteja em andamento no INPI, queiram priorizar esse pedido, mas às vezes ele nem faz menção ao Covid-19, pode participar sim, tá? Então, assim, vale para o pedido novo quanto para o pedido antigo. E como eu disse, não precisa de uma menção explícita. Ele é válido para assim, diversas atividades. A gente já sabia, né, que diversos pedidos estariam depositados, não fariam menção ao Covid, o Covid é uma doença nova, mas ele mesmo assim vale, contanto que se faça uma declaração explicando a relação dele no combate, né, diagnóstico, profilaxia ou tratamento do Covid-19. E é válido também, não precisa ser uso exclusivo, mesmo que aqueles sintomas, sei lá, febre, tosse, seja o que for, esteja presente em outras doenças, também pode ser priorizado usando essa fila, né? Esse fast track. Os requisitos básicos, eles são os mesmos praticamente de todas as outras modalidades de prioritário. Então, o pedido tem que estar publicado ou em condições de ser publicado, né? Então, assim, já passou 18 meses ou tem requerimento de publicação antecipada e tem que ter o requerimento de exame. Esses são requisitos básicos. E o requerimento vai, como qualquer outro requerimento do INPI, gera uma guia de recolhimento da União, paga, o objeto da petição é tecnologia para tratamento de Covid-19 e o único documento que tem que ser anexado é um esclarecimento. A gente... Bom, uma coisa importante, né? Essas tecnologias do Covid podem ser feitas por requerimento, que foi o que eu mostrei para vocês, mas o Ministério da Saúde enviou diversos ofícios, 4 ofícios para o INPI fazendo solicitações de trâmite prioritário. E a gente pegou esse conjunto de informações e jogou nesse gráfico interativo que está no site, depois vocês podem acessar, e aí vocês podem fazer filtros e ver se quem pediu foi o Ministério da Saúde, se foi uma petição, a situação dessas petições, qual o país, o depositante, além de outras informações. Então, vocês podem acompanhar esses resultados. E me dá uma satisfação bastante grande em ver que, ali olhando o país, o depositante, os brasileiros estão na dianteira, né, dos requerimentos utilizados aí para o tratamento, para tecnologia, para tratamento do Covid-19. Falando agora um pouquinho, então, sobre essa questão do licenciamento, o INPI criou, então, esse programa chamado Vitrine de PI. Ele tem vários módulos. O módulo atual ele é exclusivamente de patentes, então, por enquanto, só pode patentes, mas a ideia é que, ao longo do tempo, a gente inclua marcas, desenhos industriais, indicações geográficas, programas de computador e assim por diante. Ele, para compreender assim o princípio, né, ele não é uma invenção do INPI, outros escritórios já têm, eu sei que a Dinamarca tem, os Estados Unidos tem um voltado só para a Covid, a Austrália, se não me engano, tem, e a Dinamarca, que eu não lembro se eu falei ou não. Mas ele basicamente é uma vitrine onde os depositantes podem anunciar seus ativos de propriedade industrial. Então, se você fez um depósito, seja de uma tecnologia para o Covid-19, seja qualquer outra tecnologia, e você tem interesse em licenciar esse produto, você pode anunciar nessa vitrine de PI. E quando o usuário, né, o interessado acessar a ferramenta, ele vai poder ver diversas informações desse pedido. Vai poder ver o número do pedido, o título da propriedade, né, do patente de invenção, se está em negociação ou não, quando foi incluído e a situação, se já está fechado, se a patente já foi concedida ou se a patente não foi concedida ou não. Depois daqui dá para clicar em detalhes e aí aparece nome, telefone, endereço, dando os contatos de todo mundo que dos depositantes, né, das pessoas que podem efetuar a negociação. Importante destacar que a negociação não é feita através do INPI, tá? A gente passa os contatos, a negociação é um evento à parte que acontece, e depois a pessoa simplesmente aqui no site ela vai dar as condições, ou vai informar se aquela patente está sendo licenciada ou está em licenciamento ainda ou não. E, de novo, nosso site está bem completo, dá para buscar mais informações, também ali no menu sanduíche vai em projetos institucionais, programa INPI Negócios, e lá dentro vai achar, então, um vitrine de PI, onde vai ter bem mais informação. Isso aqui foi só um briefing, né, só para dar uma ideia dos novos serviços aí do INPI. Era isso que eu tinha para falar. Muito obrigado. Devolvo a palavra aí para Leonor.
Muito obrigada, Diego. Muito bom acompanhar e testemunhar toda a evolução que você referiu, o quanto o INPI tem caminhado ao longo desses anos para prestar serviços cada vez melhores. Eu comecei há 18 anos atrás na área e se eu pensar, às vezes me perguntam, principalmente clientes estrangeiros, como está o backlog do INPI, como está demorado, e de fato, se a gente tirar um snapshot, o INPI ainda tem muito que pode melhorar, mas se a gente olhar toda a progressão dos últimos anos, realmente tem sido uma caminhada de crescimento, de qualidade e de modernização louvável com poucos recursos. Então, realmente, sou uma grande fã do trabalho de vocês. Obrigada por tudo que vocês têm feito ao longo desses anos pela ABPI no Brasil. Aproveitando o tema e que o Dr. Diego falou do Fast Track no Brasil, eu gostaria de aproveitar o gancho para pedir à doutora Caroline que mostre os seus slides e para fazer a seguinte pergunta à doutora Carolina. What programs to accelerate prosecution of COVID-related inventions, if any, are available at the EPO? For example, PPH or Petition for Accelerated Examination, and are there any COVID-specific efforts underway?
Yeah, thank you, Leonor, to invite me. I'm very impressed with the presentation of Diego from the Brazilian Patent Office, because I must say I'm almost ashamed to tell you that the EPO doesn't have any specific measures for COVID applications. There is no specific fast track, no specific in licensing programs like that window. I think that are really wonderful ideas, but there's nothing from that at the EPO. So on my slide, if I can get to the next slide, I put some of the if you want to have a fast track at the EPO, basically each and every applicant can request a fast track, but this is not linked to COVID. This is for free. This is called PACE, and every applicant can ask that. So that's the EPO doesn't have any special measure for that. I put it on the slide, the website for the link where you can find all the information from the EPO regarding COVID. So what did the EPO mainly? They provided some measures to help all applicants to deal with the crisis, but they didn't provide any specific measures for COVID-related applications. So in a row here, I put them, almost all time limits have been extended up to June 2nd, so now it's behind us. One thing which is very important, I think, for the hearings, for those who are familiar with the oral proceedings at the EPO, it was already possible in examination ex parte proceedings to have video conference, to have your hearing as a video conference. It's now possible in opposition, first instance, and in appeal, if all parties agreed, it's possible to have your hearing online, and this is via video. This is quite a revolution for the EPO, I would say. But nevertheless, all hearings face-to-face that have been scheduled up to the end of this year had been postponed. So, meaning that 2021 will be a very, very busy year for those who still want to go to the EPO. What else? Some exotic thing. There is once per year an exam to become a patent attorney, a European patent attorney. That exam in 2020 has been cancelled, and it's only once per year. So it was quite it's the first time in the history. And in 2021, that will it's over. I think now a few months. And for the first time, it will be online. So I'm very curious to see that. But anyway, one interesting thing that the EPO examiners did last month is to prepare a very nice landscaping, IP landscaping presentation on the website of the EPO. I put here the link on my slide, and it's quite detailed about the countries within Europe that are very active in filing. The country in which the applicants are the most active is the Netherlands, where I come from by chance. This is a very detailed, very informative presentation if you have time to look at it. But yeah, that's it. So there is nothing special that had been done by the EPO. So yeah, That's my answer, Leonor.
Thank you, Caroline. Sania, can you please share your slides and can we hear from the US perspective?
Hi, Leonor. Hello, everyone. Thank you. I think ABPI will be able to pull up my slides in a moment. But as they're doing that, I did want to thank Leonor for inviting me to speak. And I usually try to say something in Portuguese. It's been a while since I've been there, but I think we're in the afternoon there, so bom tarde. And that's pretty much the extent of my Portuguese. So I'll be speaking in English the rest of the way. So when the slides come up, the US PTO has taken some efforts in providing some accelerated programs for COVID-related patents. My slides will be shared with the group if they don't come up, but there's a particular pilot program where the PTO, if you identify your patent application as being related to COVID, they have an accelerated examination procedure. It's a pilot program and they're allowing 500 applications to go through this process. And as I look at my notes, as of October 8th, so not too long ago, a week or so ago, there were 343 applications that applied for this accelerated examination. There are 199 of them have been granted, meaning they did fall within the criteria and they're being examined quickly at the PTO. And again, these are all COVID-related applications. You have to make certain certifications in order to apply for that type of process. The PTO is also, like the EPO, waiving certain fees until a certain time for small entity status. There we go. Great. And then if you go to the next slide, yeah, fantastic. Oh, I'm sorry, one back. That's okay. But the PTO is doing some waiving of fees or postponing fees, particularly for small entities, companies trying to file COVID applications. I think they recognize the fact that, well, I'll pause for a second. And then there we go. We seem to have lost it. But the PTO is recognizing that certain companies who might provide valuable assets in battling COVID might also be struggling financially, given everything else that's going on in the global markets. So they've taken some processes and some avenues to help with that. And then finally, there's just a COVID-related resource, and it applies not just to patents, but to trademarks. The Patent Office is trying to accommodate both patent applicants and trademark applicants in moving applications related to COVID through the process faster. We do have track one, which you could have always used to accelerate your examination of any patent application. The particular pilot program by the PTO for COVID related does try to accelerate it slightly more than track one, given the urgent need for this type of information. I think we'll touch on it later regarding licensing and how companies might be able to use this technology and how the US government might step in and the ability to do that. But I think that's going to come up in some later questions. But for now, if you have any questions, please let me know. But yes, there it is right there. We can keep it there. And
this is me now. ABPI was having a problem doing it.
Thanks.
I stepped in, sorry.
No worries. Thanks, Leonor. So you'll see links, everyone, you'll see links to the various resources the Patent Office is providing specifically related to coronavirus. And again, it's not just patents. They are providing processes and tools for trademark applications as well. And then finally, my law firm, Cooley, has a COVID resource webpage. It applies not just to patents and IP, but for venture capital funding, for other matters that may come up related to COVID, including employment issues, real estate issues now that people are working from home. So please feel free to go to that Cooley site as well. Thank you, Leonor.
Welcome. Thank you, Sania. Well, with that, I would like to ask the same to Michael, please. Michael has a very tough job because he's covering Asia and several countries at once. So it's very unfair to him. Not only he has to do this at 2 a.m., but he also has to do several countries.
No problem,
With you,
Lenore.
Michael.
It's my
Thank
pleasure.
you very much
Thank you.
again.
Thank you, Lenore. Thank you, ABPI, for inviting me to speak. Diego, I was very impressed by what's going on at the Brazilian Patent Office. That's amazing. We, in Asia, even though we were hit by COVID first, the patent offices have been pretty slow to actually do anything about it. Let me share my screen here. Okay. Let's see. Okay. No. It says I have to leave the meeting in order to share the screen. Okay, that's weird.
Sorry
Anyways.
about that. I don't know what's
Something because it's recording. But anyways,
yeah.
So basically, if you look at what's available in Asia, if ABPI can share my screen, please, or my PowerPoint presentation. I'm handling China, India, Japan, and Korea tonight. And actually, Korea has been very, very active. Yeah, if you can move to the next screen, please. Yeah, so China, India, Japan, they don't really have anything specific for COVID. All three countries do have other ways to accelerate examination, but they're not COVID specific. You have PPH programs, you have various different things like that. You can pay money in certain countries to accelerate things, but it's not specific for COVID. It's certainly available for COVID related applications, but they're not specific. Korea actually does have specific COVID-related accelerated exam, and there's actually multiple categories of that, so it depends. For the number of COVID-related applications in China, India, Japan, you really don't know. There's no published statistics or anything like that. However, you do have that information in Korea, 1,140. Actually, if you go to the link that I show on the bottom of the screen there, the www.kaipo.go.kr one, that's the Korean Patent Office's one. It consolidates a lot of information about COVID related applications and acceleration and things like that. And very similar to what Diego was talking about, it lists which ones you can license or things like that as well. One thing which is interesting is that a lot of the applications that are there are related to PPE, personal protective equipment, masks, mask making machines, things like that. And then again, for COVID specific compulsory licensing or something like that, not really. All countries, as far as I know in the world, have specific compulsory licensing laws and ability in their patent laws, but no Asian country or none of these 4 Asian countries has ever done it, issued any compulsory licensing, and specifically not for COVID. Again, mostly the other things related to COVID that are available are extensions of deadlines, similar to what you saw from Caroline in the EPO. But most of those you need to justify exactly why you were not able to reach the deadline due to COVID. So you have to submit a testimonial or a declaration as to why you missed the deadline with details. So it's not guaranteed, it's not automatic. And then in Korea, you do have patent term extensions or available if there's a COVID related delay or something like that. So that's pretty much it for Asia. Very, very simple.
Thank you, Michael. Well, COVID has undoubtedly changed the world and our lives in unprecedented ways, and it has brought health and economic issues that previously were probably unthought of. But it also brought great opportunities for innovators in all technological fields, from virus-repellent textiles to store queuing management apps. But most of the COVID-related innovation efforts relate to medicaments, vaccines, and diagnostics. My next question to you is, what restrictions are there to patenting these technologies in your territories? In Brazil, we have certain restrictions, for example, for methods of treatment, diagnostic methods, for use claims, for antibodies. So I would like to hear from you, Michael, again. What restrictions are there in those countries, please, if any?
In all the countries in Asia, pretty much across the board, you have the same type of restrictions on method of use, method of treatment claims, diagnostic claims for diseases and things like that. Countries here in Asia do allow antibodies. They do allow the medicines themselves, equipment to do treatment or diagnosis and things like that. But it's specifically for the method of treatment and the diagnosis of diseases. Where we've had a lot of problems getting claims granted, not specifically just for COVID, but for other types of things, cancer treatment, things like that, is when you have a medicine that is used in conjunction with another medicine, but they're not actually packaged and sold together in a single kit.
Okay, so more like dosage regimes or...
dosage regimes, or, you know, you need to take this 12 hours after you take a previous medicine. I mean, there's just basically no way to cover that in Asia.
What about second medical uses?
Second medical uses are generally allowed in most countries. I think China for sure, you know, so it just depends a little bit on the country, but mostly second medical uses are allowed. Not so much in India unless it's a specific surprising benefit that you wouldn't have seen elsewhere. Right? There's got the inventive step in India for second medical use is very high, very specific.
Yeah, it's quite strict. In Brazil, it's relatively strict as well. Caroline, what about, sorry, what about Europe?
Yeah. Well, the situation in Europe is, I would say, similar but not identical with Asia. Similar in the sense that we are, I mean, method of treatment are excluded from patentability, but we have a design around, I would say, which is to claim a purpose-related product claim. So this is a product claim, not a method claim. So this is product X for treating disease Y. We are allowed to claim antibodies, antibody fragment whatsoever, so no issue there. Also allowed to claim equipment, devices, no problem there. A difference with Asia that was mentioned by Michael is that for the diagnostic methods, we can claim them in Europe. They have some specific requirements, but if the method is an in vitro method, wherein you take a sample from the body and you analyze the sample outside of the body, then it's okay. And another difference is that we have lots of well, the EPO is quite flexible in the second and further medical use. So meaning you need to have some experimental data to show that there is a new effect with that new use, but yeah, you can protect different medical uses of the same substance, and that could go very far in the type of new use that you're allowed to claim.
Okay, we have similar restrictions when it comes to diagnostics in Brazil, but the use claims that we allow are Swiss type claims. We do not allow product for use claims like in Europe. Sanya, how about the US?
Sure.
All the landmark cases for diagnostics. I think we could have a 2-hour panel just on that, but if you can give us a little a little summary of the main issues, that would be great.
Yeah, so I think in the United States, there's no, our bars to patentability are pretty small. We can try to get patent claims directed to all of these issues: method of treatment claims, method of use claims, diagnostic claims, to antibodies. But what's happened more recently over the past 5 or 6 years related to all of this is that while the patent office will allow claims of this type, our court system, the legal system, is restricting the availability for some of these types of inventions. So for instance, as Leonor mentioned, diagnostic claims, or what's becoming critically important now is being able to detect COVID. One of our clients, Hologic, has different methods and means for now detecting COVID rapidly and more accurately, which is an issue we're facing. They also have tests for the antibody test to determine whether you have been infected and have the antibodies inside you. So while they can make these technologies and they can ramp them up quickly, the value is in the patent. But our courts have significantly restricted the types of diagnostic patents you can get, calling them laws of nature because you're just correlating a particular blood level of antibody or a virus and correlating it with some sort of treatment. So we've had restrictions in that sense. For antibody claims, again, the Patent Office previously allowed very broad antibody claims. You could get a claim to any antibody so long as you knew or had some information regarding the target site that it would hit. So you could get claims covering antibodies that you don't even have or made, but maybe a competitor company had because it all went to the same target. Now, again, the courts are paring back on that, and the antibody claims that we can get now are pretty restricted to the specific antibody that you made that hits that specific target. So while you were able to get a very broad claim before, the way the Patent Office is working now, given the courts, is all of these types of claims are getting more and more narrow. And then finally, we have Section 101, which is our basic patentability. You can't get a patent on things that are law of nature or natural phenomena. Courts are using that more and more, particularly in the high-tech space, a little bit less in the life science space where we practice, but they are using that more and more to, again, further restrict the types of patents that they're willing, or more specifically, types of inventions that they're allowing the Patent Office to grant.
Sania, when you mention a specific antibody, are we talking about a specific sequence, or are homology claims usually upheld?
Yeah, so you're talking about a specific sequence now. You're allowed to have some variability in there, but that variability is being narrowed. I think the most I've seen is maybe 90% homologous. And again, but you have to show, if you're going to get a claim of that scope, that those changes, like that 10% change perhaps,
it will not impact activity.
They will not impact activity. And that's difficult because that's a lot of changes, you know, if you have a 90% homology. But what companies are doing now are really trying to get picture claims of the exact sequence of the antibody that they're investigating.
Okay. Thank you, Sania. So the other question that I have is, what other protections besides patents are there in your jurisdiction available for COVID related inventions? So for example, regulatory exclusivity, data protection, trade secrets. In Brazil, we don't have regulatory data exclusivity for pharmaceutical products for human use, whether chemical, biological, or vaccines, but we do have it for pesticides, fertilizers, and pharmaceutical products for veterinary use. So in theory, we could have regulatory data exclusivity for drugs to treat animals if they get COVID. But so these, except for trade secrets, these wouldn't be very applicable in Brazil. Sania, would you like to share a little bit the scenario in the US?
Yes, so you know, with respect to other things you can do in the US for COVID related, you can do trade secret, but the US based system, when you have a an FDA approved pharmaceutical, so our regulatory agency approving drugs, is we have a linkage system. So if you get an FDA approved drug, you get certain regulatory exclusivities directly from the FDA that can protect your device or your pharmaceutical from a generic entry from anywhere from 3 to 5 years. And then we can layer on top of those things what Michael mentioned that Korea has and some other countries have, patent term extensions and patent term adjustment. So if there are delays at the patent office, you can add on patent term adjustment, but the regulatory process we know takes quite some time. The time periods to do clinical trials take some time. So you can add patent term extension that will allow you to gain back some of that time that was lost in going through the regulatory period and adding that on to your patent life. And the last linchpin in all of this in the United States is if you're trying to bring a generic version of a small molecule drug or a biosimilar version of a large molecule drug, there are certain patent litigation procedures you need to go through in the United States. For the small molecule, it's Hatch-Waxman, and for the large molecule, it's BPCIA. So in addition to the basic patent life you get, there are a number of mechanisms that further protect pharmaceutical companies on the branded side from generic or biosimilar entry of those products. Here, when we're talking about COVID, we won't see that happen for years because of the way the regulatory process works. Even if a vaccine is approved within the next, 120 days, any litigation associated with the patents around that directed to Hatch-Waxman or BPCIA won't happen for years from now. Thanks, Leonor.
Okay, thank you, Sanya. Caroline, would you like to discuss a little bit the situation in Europe?
Well, in Europe, basically, there is not a unique protection way of protection for COVID-related inventions. So everything what we have in Europe for basically other drugs that are to be registered or in the process of being registered also exists here. So you can make use of data protection. You can make use of trade secret. I don't expect that will be really used. One thing, there is also extension of patent term, like in the US. It's a different system with the SPC, but yeah, it's not specific for COVID. One thing which is for which I was pleased to see is that the EMA, so the European Medicine Agency, has a fast track for COVID-related invention. So this is basically in Europe the only thing I was able to find which is really accelerating the approval of a drug in Europe. So there is lots of information at their website, and seem that they are much less formal now, and that they promise to have a review of the file much quicker than for other types of drug. So that's hopeful. That's good.
Okay. Thank you, Caroline. Michael, in all the countries that you're covering?
Well, again, the answer is relatively simple. There are very few, if any, specific ones for COVID. They're like China, like the US has the Orange Book. China, as of this year, is starting an Orange Book program. So there will be a patent linkage. India, Japan, Korea, no, right? I mean, it's just but okay. They do have, like I said, they do have certain patent term extensions available. They do have regulatory, well, potentially they have regulatory speed up processes like Caroline was talking about in Europe. But
what about
none
data
of those have gone through
exclusivity?
the process yet. Data exclusivity, again, China in theory has data exclusivity, but it's something which, frankly, they've been talking about for years, and this year they just put it into effect. So no one's seen what it actually what happens yet. You know, Hong Kong has data exclusivity just for Hong Kong. right? Things like that. So these things do exist, but no one has seen how they're going to affect things like COVID. And like Sanya was saying, you know, litigation for this is going to be years and years and years away, right? But the most, I would say the encouraging aspect is that the regulatory agencies are pushing through, you know, potential regulatory approval very, very quickly, or at least they say they're going to. So that's, again, where you're really going to be having the best chance to actually make a difference.
Okay, thank you. I think the whole world, except maybe for anti-vaxxers, we are all eagerly waiting for a vaccine that works, or several vaccines that work. Huge efforts have been made in that respect, but not only we have to find a vaccine that works, but then we have to make it available to 8 billion people. And this, of course, will bring about challenges which are probably inconceivable for most of us. Yesterday, we saw the beginning of an important of such efforts in Brazil. We saw the publication by the Patent Office Gazette of a licensing agreement between AstraZeneca and the Fundação Oswaldo Cruz, Fiocruz, for the transfer of technology for the production of active principles for the production of a COVID-19 vaccine in the value of $25 million. This is the first licensing agreement for COVID-related technology in the country, and certainly a very important one. And my question to the panelists is, can distribution of a vaccine wait licensing and agreement on pricing? And do you know if there have been COVID-related licenses in your territories already? Or if your countries would consider, for example, joining the efforts of India and South Africa that presented a joint proposal before the WTO that seeks relaxation of IP provisions for COVID-related medicines and vaccines. Caroline, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. Well, at least in Europe, at the European level, so not at the national level, but at the European level, the European Commission had been very active last months, and they started and already reached deals with several big pharma like AstraZeneca, J&J, BioNTech, and Pfizer, Sanofi and CureVac, and last Moderna. So they have several companies for which they already made a deal on the price, and they will purchase vaccines at the European level, and they will redistribute these vaccines within Europe. I think this is quite a unique situation. I never saw this before, and so it's really Europe unified for once. So there is no public information whatsoever available about the price or whatsoever. This is completely secret. But they also claimed that. For the European Commission claims that they will also be donate some of these vaccines to countries within Europe that would have a lower income. So that I mean, let's see how it will work, but at least on paper it seems promising.
That's amazing. I think this is the time for everybody to come together and put aside a little bit financial gains and competition and really work together. Sanya, what are the news from the US?
Well, you can imagine we are in a particularly unique time, not only with COVID, but one of the most important and probably contentious presidential elections in the US history. And so what you've seen here, and perhaps some in other countries to some extent, is a big politicization of what should be just common sense medical treatment and developing vaccines and the timeline for developing vaccines. probably all of us know here that work in the life science area that vaccines take quite some time to produce. The fact that these companies, AZ, Moderna, Oxford is able to progress rapidly is amazing, and it's a testament to the hardworking people who are putting these things together. But we also see the vaccine trials going on pause, which again is quite normal in this type of procedure. But when in the United States, when you hear those things, and people who don't or are not familiar with the vaccine preparation protocols, it becomes an uproar. And President Trump is, suggesting that we'll have the vaccine before the election. We now know that won't happen. So what we're left with is companies making their own deals with the US government individually. So the United States has deals with AstraZeneca, with Moderna, to buy lots of doses of the vaccines. Okay. So once we get them, our health system is not like the health systems in many of other parts of the world, where we have a very strong public health system. We have Medicaid, Medicare, work for people who are either don't have insurance or below the poverty line, and we have our Veterans Administration. So if you were a veteran in a war or work for the military, those are the primary means where we can send medications to the public, but the vast majority of people are on private insurance. So we're not sure what we would pay individually for a vaccine, even if the US were to make it available. We're not sure how that vaccine will be distributed, to whom and to when. Again, there was some indication from the White House that they would give it to people who are at high risk, first responders, healthcare workers, and then also the next level would be the elderly in nursing homes and things like that. But again, there's so much political promises being made, given the time that we're in, the election, that it's very difficult to parse out what will actually happen when a vaccine arrives. What we do know here in the United States is that the government has provided funding for lots of companies to help develop the vaccines. Moderna is taking advantage of that. But one of the treatments that has been working, remdesivir from Gilead, that was produced with NIH funding as well, around $70-something million. So there's a big push, a big public push to have these vaccines either offered for free for everyone or at a significantly reduced price, on the theory that the public has already paid for these vaccines through their tax dollars, which are being shifted to the companies. No one's done that. No one in the government has suggested doing that. There is a mechanism for that happening. It's called the Bayh-Dole Act. It's called march-in rights. So any invention that the US helps funding, they keep the right to either take that over themselves if there's a patent and there's a US government employee as an inventor, or march in and take licensing rights. So for instance, if AstraZeneca can't make enough of the vaccine, or Moderna cannot make enough of the vaccine, the government has the right to march in, take the technology for payment, although very favorable terms, and then provide that technology transfer to generic companies or someone else that can make the vaccine. Moderna is trying to avoid that by saying that they won't enforce any of their patent rights during the pandemic. So as long as it's classified as a pandemic, they won't assert their patent rights. But a lot of people are calling that a hollow promise because there's really not a lot of companies that can make vaccines. It's a very difficult process to do. So while Moderna wants to come out being altruistic, the fact of the matter is, even if companies took march-in rights, it'd be difficult to find companies to actually make the vaccine.
They couldn't do it without the appropriate know-how transfer.
And even with the know-how, the technology is not that simple. I mean, we see the flu vaccine every year. There's shortages of flu vaccine because it doesn't always work and it's difficult to make. But yes, there are mechanisms to march in. There's mechanisms to license in. The government has never done it, and I don't see them doing it here as well either.
Okay. Has the U.S. ever used the provision of a compulsory license like it has been used in Brazil and India?
They've never done it. And the reason for it is, and there have been petitions to have the government use the march-in rights for compulsory licensing. And the government's response is always, the purpose of the margin rights is not to price adjust. It's not to fluctuate what a company would charge for a drug. And that's really what people are advocating now, to have the US government march into Moderna, AZ, and make the price cheaper. Really, the margin rights should be used in situations
To make it available.
Yeah, to make it available. They cannot make it enough, and they need other people to do it. So the government's been very clear so far that at least if it concerns pricing, they're not willing to march in to fluctuate the price.
Okay. What you mentioned, I know it's not completely related to IP, but what you mentioned about the US system is something that, for me, who was brought up in Europe and lived in Brazil most of my life, where in both places we have free and very good available healthcare. It has its challenges, but it's unthought of for someone in Europe or in Brazil to think that they won't be able to have access to health, or to pay for a HIV drug, or to pay for a vaccine, an essential vaccine. And this to me is always very impressive when it comes to Brazil, when it comes to the US. So I think Brazil has a lot of issues for sure, but having the ability to pay for essential medicines for all its population is something quite incredible. Or at least having that provision in the law and trying to implement it as much as possible. What is the situation in Asia, Michael? Both in terms of access to health, since we touched upon that, and but related to our topic, in terms of have any vaccines been licensed? What's the situation in China? I have a question here in the chat about how will China, with such a huge population, be able to provide vaccines for all its citizens? Is industry prepared for that, or will you most likely face serious shortage of vaccines?
Right. Well, China, a week ago, maybe 10 days ago, joined the WHO consortium to say that their vaccine, any vaccine that they develop, will be available worldwide. So that helps, certainly. The Chinese government would literally force local companies that didn't participate. They would force them to participate if they actually had a really great vaccine or something.
When you mean participate, by making its IP freely available? Or
well,
by
at least
making their vaccines
sure,
available?
Yeah, to make the vaccines available. And if a company in China was charging an exorbitant price or something like that for it, the Chinese government would probably slap them down because it would look so bad for China. I mean, China has already gotten so much bad press over the entire COVID situation from the beginning. They're not going to, there's no way that the Chinese government is going to take the risk of getting more bad press because they're charging too much for a vaccine, right? I mean, this is the one thing which, you may like or dislike the Chinese government for, but, they think in 50-year terms, right? Sonia will agree, our politicians can barely think in 2.5-year terms, right? Because they get into office, takes them 6 months, 8 months, a year to figure out what's going on. And then they have like 2 years effective, in
when
their
you mean
term.
our, you're talking about the US?
The U.S. I am a U.S. citizen, so I'm still thinking of, I sent in my ballot last week, so it's fine. But they only think in a 4-year term, they only have 2.5 years or 2 years effective, right? The Chinese government thinks in 50-year terms, which allows them to really take this supreme strategic view of things. And so there's no way that they're going to, allow one company who actually has a really great vaccine in China to generate bad press for all of China over something like this, right? They're going to make sure it's licensed at a reasonable rate to everyone so that you can produce 9 billion doses, or if you have to take it twice, 20 billion doses or something like that. They're going to make sure it's available. They just simply wouldn't take the chance of that generating bad press for the country. So I don't think it's likely. China, just like the U.S. and every other country, has marching rights available. But again, it's like Sonia was saying, You know, it's not for cases where the cost is too high. They've never used it, first of all, and they've also said basically it's for cases where, you know, we need this drug to treat cancer in our country. The originator is not making it available in China, so therefore we would come and try to do it. The only countries that have really used those types of rights in Asia have been India and Thailand. Other countries like Indonesia have talked about it, but they've never actually done it, I think. But it's for like AIDS and cancer drugs, basically.
Okay.
But yeah.
Thank you. I would like to open the floor for questions, and they can be directed either in writing in the chat box, or they can be, you can just unmute yourself and ask the question. And you can ask it in Portuguese or in English, whatever you're comfortable with, and our translators will translate the question to whichever language it needs to be translated to. So please go ahead and ask your questions. Okay, no questions. Everyone is amazing and nobody has doubts. I have a few questions up my sleeve. One of the questions is, and I would ask both Caroline and Sanya and Michael to answer in turn. Are your governments expediting the regulatory approval of drugs, or do you know if they are expediting the regulatory approval for drugs related to COVID? So if there are any special tracks for the regulatory approval, or if it needs to follow the standard steps and take the normal timing.
I can start since there's so much publicity around this, again, given our presidential election. The FDA has said very consistently that they are going to ensure that the vaccine that they approve, or vaccines that they approve, meet the FDA standards. There has been something that I've never seen happen, but a real distrust of the FDA and FDA approval for a vaccine because of the political process, where the sitting president is alleging that the Democrats are having the FDA slow things down so it doesn't make him look good, and what can we trust? So there's a lot of public mistrust about vaccines, which I think is going to do even more significant harm when a vaccine becomes available, because we'll still have a large population refusing to take it because they think there's something wrong with it. So the FDA has made a very concerted effort to come out as often as they can to say that they are only going to approve safe and effective vaccines. They have been doing it quicker. The companies Moderna, AZ, the clinical trials are moving at a lightning speed pace, going into phase 3 clinical trials faster than any drug that I've ever seen go into phase 3 clinical trials. So are there special mechanisms in place? Not particularly, but I think the FDA is looking at this, looking at the fact that it's a global pandemic, wants to make sure they approve a safe and effective drug, but they are allowing the pharma companies to move more quickly through the phase 2, phase 3 clinical trial process in order to get that vaccine into the market. So I think that's, to some extent, an attempt to expedite things in a safe manner.
Thank you, Sani. What about Asia, Michael?
Yeah, in Asia, certainly all of the local regulatory agencies have said that they will expedite things, but they're walking the same line that Sanya's talking about with the US FDA, where they don't want to be accused of rushing something through that wasn't really ready, right? But given the situation, certainly they are doing things much faster than you'd ever seen them before. I mean, like, you know, Sonia's saying, something going from 0 to phase 3 trials in 6 months, that's insane, right? I mean, it's just insane. But, you know, when the AZ trial was halted, you know, it made headlines all throughout Asia. You know, the fact that the US still has it halted and the UK went forward with it, you know, there's been a lot of debate I've seen in the press about people saying, is that right? Is it wrong? This and that. But again, I think they're all the regulatory agencies are taking a, you know, let's wait and see what the data says type of position. But the good thing in Asia is that it's a lot less politicized than it is in the States. There's a lot less, well, there's a lot higher trust in vaccines. The anti-vax movement never got that much momentum out here in Asia, right? The only people I hear talking about anti-vaxxing and things like that is foreign expats out here in Asia. You know, locals, they're like, well, if there's a vaccine available, I'll take it. I mean, there's no question, right? So.
That's great. We can't say the same for Brazil, Europe, and the US, I think. Sadly. Caroline,
yeah, well,
what does the regulatory approval look like in Europe?
Yeah, well, I
you did mention it a bit, yeah.
I mentioned it a bit earlier, and the only thing I can add now is that indeed, the EMA, the European Medicine Agency, it's very important for them. It's put on their website in every color and what you want, that they want to guarantee quality. So even if there is this fast track procedure, so I think this is still very important, like what Sanya said for the FDA. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you. You want to speak, Diego? Please do.
Eu tenho duas questões e vou falar em português, que a maioria é português, e para dar um pouco de trabalho para a nossa tradutora de português para inglês, aí, que ela deve estar meio abandonada. A pergunta são dirigidas aos outros participantes da mesa. Eu trouxe dados do Brasil, eu falei de dados do nosso tempo de prioritário, mas uma coisa que a gente geralmente escuta no Brasil é: estamos lidando com o nosso backlog, e quando o nosso backlog acabar, os prioritários, todos esses que a gente está criando, vão deixar de existir e não vão ter mais. E eu queria saber se é isso que se confirma na experiência internacional que se vê nos respectivos países, né? Os países de vocês todos conseguiram reduzir drasticamente o backlog, e vocês têm alguma noção de se a taxa de prioritários realmente diminuiu, realmente se extinguiu? Isso é uma coisa que cai em desuso com o tempo? Ou se não, as pessoas sempre têm essa necessidade de ter o resultado cada vez em menos tempo, né, dos seus pedidos de patente?
Ótima pergunta. Obrigada, Diego. Caroline, would you like to start?
Yes. Well, I think there is. It's depending on technical field. I think you may, you may experience some backlog or not at EPO. So it's not quite harmonized. In life sciences, I think that everything is going quite smoothly. Sometimes for one reason you don't know, there could be you will wait for 1 year before having a new office action, and sometimes it will go very fast. But in the average, I think you would get an office action every 6 months or 4 months, something. So yeah, and to be honest, I don't know. I think it's quite okay. So, and I also think that past years they hired lots of examiners, at least in life sciences, and there was a moment of a time period wherein we had very regularly office action, like it was amazing. So I think it's not always perfect, but I think this is quite okay in Europe.
Okay. What about, so you didn't use priority, specific priority?
The pace, you mean?
No, specific priority programs to tackle the backlog. This was not used in Europe.
No.
Okay. No. What about the US, Sanya?
Yeah, we didn't have any. I mean, there's always delay given the volume, but I don't think we had the backlog that Brazil faced, and we certainly didn't take measures like Brazil took to try to remove some of that backlog. And like Caroline said, the technology also plays an impact in terms of how long you wait. Our life science moves quickly, but still, I think, slower than high tech, just given the nature of the types of rejections and I think the data that some of the examiners want to see, particularly if you're going methods of treatment types claims, which we allow for. But I think overall, companies are becoming more sophisticated in using the fast track or track one system, that they might file a bunch of applications, but they focus pretty quickly on the ones they know are going to be most important. And they put those in the fast track and get those out quicker. So that if there is a backlog, it would be backlogged on applications that are probably secondary or tertiary to what their primary business objectives are.
Okay, thank you. Michael?
Yeah, I mean, India has probably one of the worst backlogs in the entire world. I've seen patents get granted 15, 17 years after filing. So, you know, when there's almost no life of it left. But the reason is mostly because they've been chronically underfunded. Like they have for at least a decade or 2 decades, they've had less than half of the examiners that they're required to have according to law, because the Indian government won't approve their salary increases, or they won't approve the budget to hire more examiners and things like that. There's some good steps that have been taken in the past 2 years relating to that, towards funding the Indian Patent Office and Trademark Office, but they've just been so chronically underfunded that, you know, it could be 12, 14 years before you actually get the patent granted, and not in even a difficult technology, right?
Is there any provision? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, and again, you, in theory, can accelerate if you meet certain conditions, but even if you try to accelerate, yeah, okay, we get the stamp which says you're going to accelerate, but there's no one there to physically examine it, right? I mean, there's just, again, they've been like funded at 50% for like 15 years. So
I think Diego can comment on probably the funding issues that we have, if you wish. But I have a question for Michael.
If you dare.
If you dare. I have a question for Michael before that, because in Brazil we also have experienced in the past, and we're getting better, problems of applications that have taken 12, 14, 17 years to be examined. But we do have a provision in our law, Article 40, that guarantees that patents are valid for either 20 years from filing or 10 years from grant, so that you have at least 10 years of life left of a patent, even if it takes 17 years to examine. Are there such provisions in India or in other Asian countries?
No, not in Asia. Not in Asia. Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
But yeah, so basically, there's no such extensions available. Again, in Korea, you do have it for certain drugs, but that's regulatory related extensions. It's not because of patent office delays. Japan, Korea, I think their prosecution times are on par with most other places. It's usually 3 to 4 years and a half if you're fast. China can be really, really fast. Even though they've got a huge backlog, I think the average pendency now is less than 2.5 years. And that's simply because they've hired, 8,000 patent examiners each year for the past 10 years. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's insane how many people they have and they train and hire each year. So, but usually I'm looking at 2.5 to 3 years to get a patent granted, a normal patent granted in China.
Diego, do you want to comment anything on the Brazilian Patent Office challenges, or would you rather abstain from commenting?
Não vou fazer comentário simples. por o Brasil, o INPI também por bastante tempo teve um problema bastante similar com o da Índia, que o número de pedidos de patente foi crescendo, e se olha os gráficos internacionais, eles têm uma escalada muito rápida, né? E, claro, a infraestrutura do INPI não conseguiu acompanhar por N motivos, né? E um deles, o mais óbvio, é que o examinador de patente não é uma pessoa que vai ali, contrata e a pessoa já sai examinando. Ele demora um tempo, às vezes 2 ou 3 anos, até ser totalmente formado e poder examinar. E aí, claro, que gerou o nosso backlog. E aí, trazendo de novo a pergunta para o campo dos prioritários, né? O INPI tinha algumas modalidades de trâmite prioritário, mas elas não davam vazão, e como eu mostrei nos gráficos, mesmo quando tinha prioritário, demorava 600 dias, né, que é o tempo padrão aí dos outros escritórios examinarem. Então foi um processo também de
600
aprendizado.
dias para saber se eles estavam dentro do programa ou 600 dias para decidir?
Era
600 dias para decidir.
Para decidir, era quase um ano para simplesmente saber se estava dentro do programa e mais um ano para tomar a decisão. A gente tinha, assim, vamos chamar de 2 problemas a atacar, né? Um era, tínhamos que decidir mais rápido esses requerimentos e tínhamos que decidir mais rápido essas patentes prioritárias. E claro, foi um aprendizado. A gente demorou bastante tempo para chegar nos resultados que a gente tem hoje, mas a gente conseguiu. E claro que agora, com o plano de ataque ao backlog, a gente pretende que isso se espalhe, né, para diversos pedidos e que a gente consiga reduzir. E a gente tinha também pedidos que demoravam aí 13, 14 anos para decidir. Graças a Deus, esses casos que caem no artigo 40 e parágrafo 1º estão caindo drasticamente, e a previsão é que agora, em muitas divisões esse ano, em algumas ainda ano que vem, a gente extingua esse grupo de pedidos aí.
Sim, do ponto de vista do usuário, o que nós temos visto de fato é uma atividade muito maior do INPI e uma celeridade muito maior entre uma opinião e a opinião seguinte. Eu lembro que houve épocas em que havia uma opinião, nós respondíamos, 2 anos depois vinha a próxima opinião e nós já não lembrávamos de nada, porque tinham-se passado 2 anos e tínhamos que estudar o caso, ou a pessoa que estava responsável pelo caso tinha saído do escritório, ou estava em licença maternidade, ou enfim. E hoje a gente percebe que é muito mais rápido e a gente realmente consegue manter a mesma equipe e as coisas frescas na cabeça. Então isso mudou bastante, eu acho, a interação com o INPI do ponto de vista do usuário. E nós vemos realmente muito mais celeridade de resposta, muito maior depois de todos esses programas implementados. Então, enfim, acho que todos temos esperança que aos pouquinhos a gente consiga resolver o backlog e que logo o INPI passe a ser um escritório de referência que tem timings parecidos com os timings que se vê nos grandes escritórios de propriedade industrial. Não tem por que não ser assim, temos recursos humanos fantásticos, talvez precisemos de aumentar um pouco e de ter recursos financeiros maiores, mas temos toda a capacidade para fazermos ótimos pareceres e patentes que são robustas e que dão segurança jurídica aos usuários do sistema de ABPI. Não sei se mais alguém da plateia tem mais alguma pergunta. Eu tenho uma pergunta, se ninguém tiver. Todos estão caladinhos, porque já é final de congresso, está todo mundo cansado. Eu tenho uma pergunta para o Sânia, que é o nosso advogado de contencioso do painel. Eu vou mudar para inglês. Sânia, since you're the litigator of the panel, I'd like to ask you, not just in the US, but worldwide, you were mentioning that, Moderna is saying that they will not enforce the patents while the pandemic is going on. But even after the pandemic, I think COVID-19 for the next 20 years, when the patents will be valid, will certainly be in our memories. And if we do tackle this, it will be, something that will, people will be talking about 5, 10, 15 years from now. Do you think companies will want to have the bet the bad press associated with enforcing COVID-related patents. What would you say as a litigator, or will they just say, well, I don't care, it's my technology and I'm enforcing it and I don't care about the bad press? Could you comment on that?
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. First, I want to say you could have spoken in Portuguese because the interpreter is doing a fantastic job translating it to English. So
I know they are. I keep switching between the two channels.
Good job at that. But I think you bring up an important point. You know, my mom grew up around the time the polio vaccine came out, and the Salk Institute and Salk said, you know, no patents on it. You know, polio vaccine is such a devastating disease. They gave it out. No intellectual property rights on that. Here, all the companies are getting IP rights on it, but I think at least in the next few years, if the vaccines are good but not completely eradicating, you won't see enforcement of these rights. I just think companies like Moderna, AZ, whatnot, they just don't want that bad press. Or what they'll do is, instead of enforcing it, give very, very favorable licensing terms, such that they'll still make money, but not be looked upon as preventing availability of the vaccine. Because remember, those IP rights really relate to availability of the vaccine to a larger population. If that's the issue and AstraZeneca can't make enough of it, I don't see them having any issue giving technology transfer rights to someone else to do it. But if the vaccine is so effective after 1 or 2 doses, depending on how many we get, and we see after a year and a half or 2 years, the infection rate and COVID-19 really being managed, and then there are companies that are just trying to do seasonal COVID, then in those situations, I might see enforcement. But I would only see that if the vaccine proves to be very, very effective, and that within 2 years or so, we see COVID-19 really, really go down.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. I think that those thoughts that it would only be in a situation of, unfair use that they would litigate is very wise. Eu tenho uma pergunta da plateia para o Diego, que diz: como pesquisadora, escrita de solicitação de patentes, de pedidos de patentes, é uma outra linguagem e não temos tempo para fazer isso. Os problemas crônicos existentes nos nichos das instituições brasileiras, você acha que a pandemia trouxe um impacto para a melhoria significativa da relação entre o pesquisador, o nicho da universidade e o INPI? Se não trouxe ainda, você pensa em alguma maneira de melhorar essas interações, talvez especificamente para a Covid-19, como experimento, o INPI possa fazer um canal simplificado diretamente para o pesquisador, sem passar pelo nicho e sem passar por um escritório especializado em propriedade intelectual?
Sim, eu agradeço a pergunta é excelente. Eu vou dar minha opinião pessoal primeiro, só para seguir a sequência aqui de respostas e depois de falar de um outro programa que o INPI está fazendo, tá? Eu acho que a ideia do nicho como um todo, ela é uma ideia excelente, assim, ter um grupo de pessoas dentro das universidades especializados em propriedade industrial. Eu não sei se isso tem nos escritórios nos outros países, mas no Brasil se criou esse instituto. E esse escritório ele teria tanto a capacidade de escrever, redigir pedidos de patente, né, quanto negociar essas patentes e essa propriedade intelectual com a indústria. Então, melhoraria, né, esse sistema nacional de inovação, essas formas, essa relação da universidade com as empresas. Acho a ideia fantástica. Eu sinto que um dos problemas crônicos que o colega comentou, que pelo menos chega para nós do INPI, é que a rotatividade desses nichos acabam ficando muito grandes. Então, ao invés de repente, eu não sei como se contrata, mas em vez de contratar um funcionário, um servidor público, talvez, contrata um bolsista, contrata um terceirizado, esse cara fica por ali por 1, 2 ou 3 anos e acaba que ele é contratado ou por um outro escritório de propriedade industrial, ou ele mesmo abre o seu escritório, ou ele acaba levando essa expertise para outro lado e acaba não aproveitando. Então, acho que esse é um probleminha que ser mais ou menos fácil de resolver, que podia ser resolvido facilmente, que seria valorizar esses profissionais de modo que eles se perpetuassem, e aí eles sim teriam a capacidade de traduzir essa linguagem acadêmica, que é uma linguagem específica, para uma linguagem de patentes, que é outro tipo de linguagem específica. Essa é a primeira solução que eu posso propor. A segunda, o INPI, e deixa eu falar bem dos NITs, tá? Nós temos NITs excelentes no Brasil, muitos NITs são ativos, tem NITs que pegaram universidades que tinham 1, 2 depósitos e hoje em dia são as maiores depositantes de patentes do Brasil. Então, assim, tem NITs que quando o pessoal pega junto, eles realmente conseguem trazer bons resultados aí para a universidade como um todo. Junto a isso, nós do INPI, a gente tentou diversas vezes fazer palestras e disseminações em universidades. E só para explicar o que eu quero dizer, escrever um pedido de patente é tão fácil ou tão difícil quanto escrever um artigo científico ou um paper. Eu sou doutor, né? Tenho asilado acadêmico e também sou examinador de patente, posso dizer isso, que os dois são difíceis, têm suas dificuldades e têm suas especificidades. Então, acho que, e muitas vezes, os nossos doutores, os nossos pesquisadores acabam divulgando a matéria, fazendo paper, divulgando em congresso, etc., e lá depois acabam se preocupando com o pedido de patente, o que deveria ser o contrário. Porque tu devia primeiro se preocupar com o pedido de patente, não divulga isso. No momento que você faz o depósito, aí sim você começa a se preocupar com papers, divulgação, congressos, seminários, etc. Isso vai aumentar a tua qualidade do teu pedido automaticamente e vai evitar que se use o seu próprio invento, né? Assim, seus próprios papers contra você na sua patente. E isso acontece. Tem diversas universidades que acabam esperando 5, 6 anos o backlog e perdem esse pedido de patente porque se achou um artigo científico, né? E é fácil de achar, às vezes assim, o nome da pessoa do artigo científico e da patente é a mesma, a gente identifica isso facilmente no INPI. E agora, para finalizar, tem um programinha que o INPI está lançando dentro do INPI Negócios, que é uma atividade nova que o INPI está lançando, que é a mentoria de propriedade industrial. Então, vão ser selecionados algumas empresas ou algumas instituições que recebem financiamento público e essas pessoas vão ter um atendimento premium, vamos dizer assim, um plus de atendimento. O INPI vai entrar em contato, vai observar aquela empresa ou aquele grupo, né, e ver daquele contrato de financiamento público, o que pode sair de propriedade industrial, se pode sair patente, se pode sair desenho industrial, se pode sair uma marca, vai dar treinamento para esse pessoal de como proceder com essa propriedade industrial, até que, então, assim, e depois vai acompanhar durante o processo, né? Não vai ser feito efetivamente o depósito, não vai ser feita as buscas necessárias, a gente vai dar um atendimento plus, acho que seria esse a melhor forma de compreender, porque a gente não vai substituir um escritório. Certamente o escritório de propriedade industrial e os NITs continuarão sendo necessários para o follow-up do processo. Mas, assim, o fato de voltar com um atendimento mais personalizado um pouco e começar com isso de forma piloto, eu acho que é uma iniciativa bem interessante que está vindo por aí. Eu não sei se eu dei spoiler, mas tomara que já tenham dito isso em algum lugar, ou eu dei spoiler aqui e vão puxar minha orelha depois, mas eu acho que já saiu isso no site do INPI.
Obrigada, Diego. Para mim foi spoiler, não sei se para mais alguém foi, mas um spoiler muito bom. Na verdade, não spoil nada. E não estragou nada. Realmente é uma iniciativa muito boa, é uma iniciativa que nós precisamos. Muitos dos pesquisadores que chegam no escritório, nós acabamos dizendo, você publicou, assim, é muito frequente. Isso me acontece com muita frequência. Ainda, sei lá, umas 2 semanas, um projeto que eu estava analisando, e já houve publicação, era uma parceria de uma universidade com uma empresa, e a universidade já tinha parceria e publicou sem autorização da empresa, enfim. De fato é complicado e cada vez mais, se todos, e eu digo os agentes de propriedade industrial, os advogados e o INPI, e os NITs, ajudarmos a educar a comunidade, cada vez mais as pessoas vão saber melhor como proteger a sua PI e cada vez mais as pessoas vão usar o sistema de melhor forma. Então, acho que cabe a todos nós da comunidade de PI no Brasil estarmos dispostos a participar de seminários, a dar aulas, a ensinar, a ter paciência com os clientes que chegam no escritório e de repente sabem muito pouco do sistema e com calma explicando como as coisas se passam, a vocês e a NPI também. E aos poucos o ambiente de PI vem melhorando e vai melhorar cada vez mais. Isso que você falou dos nichos, de fato, no início havia muito poucos nichos, hoje há muitos mais. Ainda existe uma certa rotatividade, como você mencionou, mas existem os nichos e está se caminhando na direção certa. Definitivamente é um prazer ver esse crescimento e esse amadurecimento do sistema de PI no Brasil. Eu gostaria já deu a nossa hora, chegamos na nossa hora, e eu gostaria de agradecer a todos do painel, em especial ao Michael, para quem são 3 da manhã agora e precisa ir dormir, ao Diego por todas as palavras sábias e por ter dividido conosco todos esses programas e ter representado tão bem o INPI, e ao INPI por sempre colaborar com a ABPI para a melhoria do sistema de PI no Brasil, ao Sânia, com quem eu já dividi diversos painéis, e é sempre um prazer trabalhar com você, e a Caroline, com quem também já trabalho há alguns anos e tenho o maior prazer de trazer para esse painel. Obrigada a todos pela presença e obrigada a todos os participantes do painel. Tenho a certeza que todos nós estamos disponíveis por e-mail, caso tenham perguntas. Acredito que todos os panelistas estejam disponíveis para responder quaisquer perguntas que possam surgir depois. Obrigada a todos.